All right, as we wrap up the tapestry weavings, we're going to go in and start 3 steps of cutting off the top edge and then beginning to stitch in the top and bottom, and then also sewing in any of those loose ends. So obviously with your weaving, you should be closer to 3 to 4 inches from the top. For my example, I'm just going to trim about 3 to 4 inches away from my weaving itself. For most of you, this will end up being either right next to the teeth, or you're going to go in behind and cut around the teeth. Then what I'm going to do is lightly fold my weaving over itself, so I'm looking at the back side, and then you're going to grab a smaller tapestry needle and you're going to grab a dowel. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start to sew in the warp ends. For this process, we're going to do essentially kind of like a U-stitch. We're going to sew the dowel in and around. And then what you'll do is you're going to do about 5 stitches down, 5 stitches back up, and then you can trim your ends so that you're not seeing quite as much of that end tuck through. And then you'll just move on to the next pair. You're going to continue this process of pairing those up and then wrapping around the dowel, sewing down about 5 stitches, sewing up 5 stitches, and then continuing. With the U-stitch, just make sure that you aren't going into the exact same weft or warp threads. The other thing to make sure that you are doing is that you are not having the warp extend over to the front. You're essentially going in between the pocket that's made by the warp between those different ends of weft. So just make sure that you're being careful. You can kind of gently flip it over every now and again, and then you're just going to make sure that that's pulled tight so the dowel is firmly wrapped around the top of that weaving, and it's not either loose or baggy in places. Otherwise, you're going to continue that process going across the whole thing. The step is a little repetitive, but make sure that you are taking care to really get these stitches in. This ends up being a really structural, kind of integral part of your weaving itself. So take the time, make sure that you are getting each of those settled. Again, I would say do 5 or 6 stitches up and down as you continue through. And then once you have all your ends sewn in, then what we're going to do is we're going to start the same process but from the bottom. So we're going to gently remove the weaving from the bottom side of the loom. When you do this, the only part that you have to be really careful with is the end of thread that is loose. Since the rest are looped around those teeth, they're essentially going to hold together and keep that weaving all as one piece. For the one at the very end, what you're going to do is you're going to remove the tape. If you have a little bit of tearing in the cardboard, that's fine, but you're going to take that thread off. You're going to get it unwound from that last tooth. And then what you'll do is you're going to do that same process that you did with the top, except with that one last bottom stitch. So you're going to get that onto your needle. You're going to do that stitch about 5 up, 5 down, and then get the remaining end cut off. And then for the remaining loops on the bottom, you don't have to do anything. Those are going to just hold in place. There's nothing as far as structural integrity that you need to really worry about. It's just this one last stitch on the bottom that we'll take care of before we get finished up with this process of getting the top and bottom end cut off and sewn back into the project. And then for the last or the second step that we're going to do is going to be flipping this weaving back over. We're going to start to sew in any of those loose ends from the color changes. This is going to be pretty similar to what we just did with getting those ends sewn back into the weaving. It's a little bit more simple though. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with one of your ends. You're going to get it onto your needle. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sew it about three rows down. The end will poke through, and then pulling it relatively tight, you're going to trim the end just enough so that you can cut off the excess without it poking underneath or poking above the weft that you've stitched it through. And then you're going to continue that same process with the rest of the ends. So you're going to get that end onto your needle. You're going to get it lined up, stitch about 3 over, pull it back out, and then you're going to trim off any remaining end that you have. Just being careful as you pull that you're not pulling it so tight that you're getting distortion in your weaving itself. Otherwise, it'll be pretty much that same process for all of your ends. If you have some that are in the Raya knots and Raya loops. Oftentimes you don't really have to worry about those ones, especially if they're kind of disguised by that texture. Otherwise, as far as going through with this, I would say just take your time, make sure that you are getting all of those tucked in, and then as you continue through, just make sure that you're kind of keeping a system going so you're not missing any of your ends as you start to finish that up. Oftentimes what I'll do is start kind of from the top and work my way down. Some people like to do it as far as kind of blocking off sections of color and then working kind of block by block. Really just depends on how you want to do it, but I'd say just find some sort of system that's going to be a little bit easier for you to remember which ends that you have left, and try to be a little bit more systematic with it, since it can be sometimes a little bit easier than you think to forget some of those ends. Otherwise, you're just going to go through, you can all get all those sewn into the project, and then this is going to wrap up most of our weaving. Our last step is going to be looking at getting these ready for display. So with this, we are going to add a piece to the dowel at the top. With this, we're going to just create a length of thread that is going to allow us to hang this. As far as a length to grab, I would say think about twice the length of your dowel. This gives you a little bit of extra, so you have some extra ends that you can work with. And then what you're going to do is you are going to start to tie off one end. I would say just do a simple double knot. You're going to get that just tied in along the side of your weaving. Then what I can do from here is I can either take that extra end and I can stitch it down into my weaving so I'm not seeing it. I can also just trim that loose. Either way works out just fine. And then I'm going to repeat that process on the other side. With that other side, I'm going to start to look at how far over or how tall I want that hanging piece to be. So depending on the overall angle that I'd like, I'm going to look a little bit at that. If you are someone that is stitching in that end, since the knot is holding most of that together, you're just going to do those 3 stitches down like you did with the rest of the ends in your weaving. And then for color selection with these, doesn't really matter too much. I would say just a good rule of thumb is try to pick a color that kind of works with your overall color scheme, or if you have one that, one of those colors that you really like, think of just kind of bringing one of those different yarns into that hanging piece. Otherwise, once you have that kind of a height established that you want for that hanging, then what you're going to do is you're just going to tie off the other end, just making sure that you're leaving enough thread for that desired height that you want, and then it'll be that same process on that other side. Otherwise, that is it for the weaving itself. Once you get everything wrapped up, just make sure that you're getting those small tapestry needles returned along with the looms themselves. The heddle, the cardboard pieces that we use, those can just get tossed in the trash or in the recycling. And then any remnant thread that got trimmed off, get that thrown away. And then once you have your weaving ready, you can get that handed in. I'm just going to grade these as they come in so that you can take them home today or tomorrow instead of having to wait. Otherwise, that'll be it. Let me know if you have questions, but you're good to go.